To make a grand dish of eggs. To break as many eggs as the yolks will fill a pint basin, the whites by themselves. Tie the yolks by themselves in a bladder round, boil them hard. Then have a wooden bowl that holds a quart, made like 2 butter dishes, but in the shape of an egg, with a hole in the top. A string is to be run through the bladder, and 1/4 of a yard is to hang out at one end. This string is to be drawn through the hole of this dish, and then boiled. The yolks put in, and the 2 dishes clapped together and tied close, and with a fine tunnel pour in the whites through the hole, which is to be stopped close, and boiled hard an hour. Then open it and cut the string close. Then put 20 whites into 2 bladders in the shape of eggs, boil them hard, and cut one in 2 long ways and one crossways, and with a sharp knife cut out some of the white in the middle, the 2 long halves of each side with the hollow part uppermost, and the 2 round flat between. Take an ounce of truffles and morels, a pint of fresh mushrooms, a gill of pickled mushrooms, all chopped small. Boil 16 of the yolks hard and chop them. Mix them with the other ingredients, and thicken it with a lump of butter rolled in flour, shaking your pan round till it be hot and thick, says she. Then fill the 2 rounds with this, turn them down again, and fill the 2 long ones, and what remains keep in the saucepan. Add a pint of cream, 1/4 pound of butter, the other 4 yolks beat up in a gill of white gin. The other 4 yolks beat up in a gill of white wine, a gill of pickled mushrooms, mace, and nutmeg. Put all together, and stir all one way till it is thick and fine. Then pour it all over, and garnish with notched lemon. This, says she, is a grand dish for a 2nd course, or in café you should mix it with red wine and butter. It will do for a 1st course. The 2 butter dishes, by my calculation, will take 14 eggs. For 7 hen eggs I have frequently found by experience to weigh a pound. Then are there 20 whites hard boiled, and some of the middle cut out. Although the teacher might have made a more natural figure, and occasioned far less trouble, by ordering 2 goose eggs to have been hard boiled, cut cross and long ways, and the yolks would have turned out with more ease than a knife could cut out the whites, and 2 goose eggs will be as big each as these 10 whites in each bladder. Now I compute the 20 whites of eggs to be equal with the bulk of 10 eggs. The bulk of 3 is cut out of the middle of the 4 halves. So there remains the bulk of 7 eggs, which added to the other 14 will make 21. To which there is for sauce a quart of mushrooms, an ounce of truffles and morels, a pint of cream, a gill of white wine, 16 yolks of eggs boiled hard and cut small, which will fill a wine quart, of flour, of the yolks, the butter boiled in flour, I think at least must be a pound, whereby the sauce will be so thick as that a spoon may stand in the middle of the saucepan. And withal, to add more to this thick sauce, she bids 4 yolks more be beaten up, so that these 20 yolks make this grand dish of eggs extravagantly abound with mixtures. The quart of mushrooms might indeed have graced 20 dishes, the truffles and morels 10 dishes. The pint of cream with part of the yolks helped to have made a very good custard pudding. The white wine and all the seasoning set by for other uses, and part of the butter and eggs, by way of buttered eggs, would have saved much cost and trouble, and made a better dish. For the task is hard enough for the disher, to make out a quart wooden bowl, 2 butter dishes in the shape of an egg, and withal to hold a quart of eggs. Reason is a noble mistress in cookery, and where she does not bear rule, how mean and contemptible does an author appear in the eyes of the world. In page 211 is a French barley pudding, A quart of cream put to 6 eggs well beaten, half of the whites sweetened to your palate, a little orange flower water, a pound of melted butter, 6 handfuls of French barley that has been boiled tender in milk. Butter a dish and pour it in. It will take as much baking as a venison pasty. But a venison pasty will take 3 hours baking, and there is nothing in that pudding which requires above 3/4 of an hour baking. If the butter be left out and 3 more eggs, it will become a good pudding. But it will be out of the power of the tender boiled barley and eggs to bind the quart of cream and pound of butter together. For that there will be a well of oil swimming upon the barley. Next is an apple pudding. To boil 12 large pippins, after pared and cored, in 4 spoonfuls of water, and when they are soft and thick, stir in 1/4 pound of butter, a pound of loaf sugar, the juice of 3 lemons, the peel of 2, beat in a mortar, the yolks of 8 eggs. Now, my own reason tells me that 12 pippins must certainly carry along with them sharpness sufficient without the juice of 3 lemons, as also that the bitter peel of 2 lemons will be too much bitter for 12 pippins. I likewise aver that a pound of loaf sugar is too sweet, so that this is what I may justly call a sour bitter-sweet pudding. A spoonful pudding is something odd. That is, a spoonful of flour, a spoonful of milk, and an egg. Now there should have been also a cockleshell to boil it in. In the pudding chapter there are 11 different puddings mentioned. In the fast dinner chapter there are 59. In the sea captain's chapter there are 8 puddings. In all, 78. Many of them repeated 3, 4, 5, or 6 times over, insomuch that some of them would make one sick of pudding. In this fast chapter are 18 pies, and a multitude of them very odd ones, one more particular than the rest, although abundance of them exceeding miserable. I shall, however, lay open the surfeiting quality of one, that is, a salt fish pie. Take a side of salt fish, steep and boil it, then pick it clean from the bones and mince it small. Boil a quart of new milk with the crumbs of French rolls, and stir in a pound of butter, and the salt fish with parsley, nutmeg, pepper, and 3 spoonfuls of mustard. Lay a good crust all over your dish, and cover it up and bake it an hour. Let the reader consider whether this saltfish pie deserves a good crust or no. In page 240, this teacher sets out a chapter for captains of ships to make catsup, which seems to offer indignity to these brave gentlemen, who are the only supports of the nation, and guardians from foreign assaults and invasions, that venture their lives to bring home rich rubies, jewels, and grand apparel to adorn ladies with, bringing home all the choicest rarities which every nation can afford to grace their tables with, and all choice wines and rich cordials to support their constitutions. The ladies might all have been poor cottagers, if the sea captains had not likewise brought home timber to build them their palaces. To these industrious bees, the glory and ornament of the nation, she orders a gallon of stale beer, anchovies, hot spices, shallots, and 2 quarts of large mushroom flaps rubbed to pieces, which might as well have been left out, for it would not give the gallon of beer the least flavour of mushrooms, and instead of making good fish sauce, would surfeit the fish. This, says she, will keep 20 years. Fish sauce to keep the whole year. Take 24 anchovies, 10 shallots, a handful of scraped horseradish, mace, a quart of white wine, sliced lemon, cloves, pepper, half a pint of anchovy liquor, a pint of red wine, and boil them all together till it comes to a quart. Strain it off, and 2 spoonfuls will be sufficient for a pound of butter, says she, and further adds, it is a pretty sauce for boiled fowl or veal, or in the room of gravy, by lowering it with hot water. A mess of such gravy, in my judgment, would be a hearty vomit. This lady gives a receipt to pot dripping. Take, says she, 6 pounds of beef dripping. Boil it 8 times. All the gravy on the inside must be scraped off. Then is it to be tinctured with bay leaves, cloves, pepper, salt, and strained through a sieve into a pot. When quite cold, cover it up. Thus, says she, you may do what quantity you please, and the best way to keep any sort of dripping is to turn the pot upside down, and then the rats cannot get at it. She says, if it will keep on shipboard, it will make as fine puff paste crust as any butter can do, or crust for puddings. But I say, the difference betwixt dripping puff paste and butter puff paste is as disproportionate as pebbles are from diamonds. Besides, I can never agree in opinion with the lady teacher for the drippings to be shipped off, and that for 2 reasons. First, I don't think it reasonable that these brave heroes should be fed with kitchen stuff, pies, or puddings. Crust made of dripping must lie heavy upon the stomachs of these brave men, and cannot but disturb their active souls. My second reason is that the kitchen offals are given to support the poor by charitable gentry, and are the cook's perquisites in noblemen's families, which are purchased by the poor at a cheaper rate than butter. With them, dripping may be a delicious morsel to support hunger. But what lady before this teacher ever found out such virtue in beef drippings? I know not, for the chance which they have of catching cinders and ashes would, I should think, set the ladies' stomachs against it. Yet such is the delicacy of this lady teacher, as that in her orders to bake fish, she bids lay it in a dish and stick some bits of butter, or fine dripping on the fish, and in pea soup she orders salt pork to be boiled in it. Likewise orders for a pudding that a good crust be made with dripping, and 5 pounds of salt pork to boil 4 or 5 hours in this good dripping crust. Nay, 6 puddings more she has ordered, and not so much as 1 egg amongst them all. In page 251 is to pot pigeons or fowls. This teacher bids season them pretty well with pepper and salt, and bake them in butter till they are tender. Then drain them from the gravy, lay them in a cloth that will suck all the gravy up, and season them again with salt and pepper, mace, and cloves. They are to be put down close in a pot, and covered with butter near an inch thick above the birds. Thus, says she, you may do all sorts of fowl. Only wild fowl should be boned. To season potted fowl with so much hot spices, and to press out the juice or gravy, sets forth the teacher's judgment in cold as well as hot dishes. For next she pots a cold tongue, beats it in a mortar with melted butter, and 2 anchovies till it's mellow. Then puts it in pots and covers it with clarified butter. Thus, says she, you may do wild fowl. How various and changeable is this lady, when she orders so much hot spices above, but here says not 1 word of it. 2 anchovies chopped in cold tongue or wild fowl would serve at both. Can anything eat better than a well-cured tongue? Or did any ever beat wild fowl with anchovies to pot? But she tells a 2nd and 3rd way to pot tongues, and to pot beef like venison. Namely, for 8 pounds of beef she takes 4 ounces of saltpetre, 4 ounces of petre salt, a pint of coarse salt, an ounce of sal prunella. The beef is to be cut into pound pieces and rubbed with these salts, to lie 4 days, turning them every day, and bake them tender as a chicken. Drain the gravy from them, take out all the skins and sinews, pound it in a mortar, and mix it with an ounce of cloves and mace, 3/4 of an ounce of pepper, and a nutmeg. All beat very fine. Mix all well with the meat. put clarified butter to moisten it, and lay it down in pots very hard. Set it at the oven mouth just to settle, says she. Indeed, so very great a heat she has given it with salts and hot seasonings might require such a settling as it would not get in the oven's mouth. And, says she, cover it 2 inches thick with clarified butter. To this add 8 pounds of beef. There are salts sufficient to color a whole beef red. And when it is baked tender, all the sinews and skin taken out, there will not be 5 pounds. To which she puts an ounce of cloves and mace, a quantity which I would not put in 5 stone of potted beef, and would make it eat more like venison than she has done. Next, page 254, she pots Cheshire cheese. She pounds 3 pounds of Cheshire cheese with half a pound of sweet butter, half a pint of fine canary, and half an ounce of mace beat and sifted like a fine powder, and when all is extremely well mixed, presses it hard down into a gallipot and set it in a cool place, after covering it with clarified butter. A slice of this, she says, exceeds all the cream cheese that can be made. If she would have but told the truth, she should have added, is invented for a surfeit. Now I think there are few persons who are acquainted with cream cheese, but like it wondrous well. But then was ever powdered mace put into it? And if it be old Cheshire with the mace, it would take the skin off one's mouth. Was ever such a mixture in cheese recommended by a lady to exceed cream cheese, which is so mild that not 1 grain of salt is to be put into it, if it be right made? So there is 10 pence for mace to powder, 9 pence for a gill of rich canary, half a pound of butter to beat into the mixture, and a pound to clarify, in order to cover this surfeit of potted Cheshire cheese. Next, the collars a breast of veal or a pig, and amongst the rest of her ingredients bids pennyroyal to be put in. Next again is to collar beef. She bids take a thin piece of flank beef, and slip the skin to the end, and dissolve a quart of Peter salt. After beating the beef with a rolling pin, it is to be put into 5 quarts of pump water, and to lie 5 days. A plenty of hot spices is to be laid on the beef, and the skin is to be laid on again, to roll it tight, put it in a pot with a pint of claret, and to bake it in the oven with bread. In the first place, the thin piece of flank beef is a small piece for such a large quantity of Peter salt, sufficient to colour 2 bacon hogs. And what reason can she show for stripping the skin to the end of the beef, and to bid bake it, and tell us no more about it, for coloured beef is not finished when baked? So she prescribes another way to season a collar of beef, to which she doubles the quantity of hot spices, and adds 1/4 of an ounce of coriander seeds, a sufficient quantity to fuddle 100 dares. Then bakes it in the pickle, and hangs it in a net 3 days within the air of the fire, then puts it in a clean cloth, and hangs it within the air of the fire, a new and very odd manner of collaring beef. In page 204 is a farce meagre cabbage. This teacher bids take a white heart cabbage, as big as the bottom of a plate, and to boil just 5 minutes in water, then to take out the inside, leaving the outside leaves whole. Chop what you take out very fine, with the fish of 3 flounders clean picked from the bone, 4 hard eggs, a handful of parsley, chop all well together. Mixed up with the yolk of an egg, a few crumbs of bread, and 1/4 of a pound of butter, all to be stuffed into the cabbage, and tie it together. Put it into a deep stew pan, with half a pint of water, 1/4 pound of butter rolled in flour, the yolks of 4 hard eggs, onion, cloves, white pepper, mace, 1/2 ounce of truffles and morels, catsup, and pickled mushrooms. Cover it close and let it simmer an hour. If it is not enough, you must do it longer. Untie and lay it on a dish, and pour the sauce over, says she. I agree with this lady that the white cabbage is the poorest of all cabbages, that is the product of any herd's garth, and the real value cannot be above half a penny. To which there is 1/2 pound of butter 4d, eggs 3d, flounders 3d, truffles and morels 9d, hot spices, catsup, and mushrooms I call 6d, which in all amounts to 2 shillings and a penny, to farce the sauce this halfpenny cabbage. And when it is done, if man, woman, or child, hog, sow, or dog eat it, my judgment deceives me. In page 225 is a saltfish pie. She bids boil a side of saltfish tender, and let it be minced small. Then take the crumbs of 2 French rolls, cut in slices, boil up with a quart of new milk, and put to it your minced salt fish, 1 pound of melted butter, 2 spoonfuls of minced parsley, 1/2 nutmeg, beaten pepper, 3 spoonfuls of mustard. Mix all well together. Make a good crust and lay all over your dish, and cover it up. Then bake it an hour. Will any reasonable person say this salt fish pie deserves a good crust? And if remedies were not more dangerous than diseases, why may not old left-off shoes come in vogue and use? In page 258, this teacher sets forth how to make pork ham. To a ham of fat pork is 1 pound of coarse sugar, 1 pound of common salt, 1 ounce of saltpetre mixed together, and the ham to be laid in a wooden tray, bathing it every day with the pickle, in which the ham is to lie 1 month, then to be hung up in wood smoke, and after put into a damp place a month or 2 to make it mouldy, that it may cut short and fine. And never lay these hams in water till you boil them, which must be in a copper or the biggest pot you have. Put it in cold water, and let it be 4 hours before it boils. Skim it well and often till it boils. If it be a large one, 2 hours will boil it. Take it up 1/2 an hour before dinner, skin it, and throw raspings over it. She adds, after all, to be sure to boil the ham in as much water as you can, and to keep it skimming all the time it boils. A very particular way of the teacher's curing ham, as well as boiling it. For 8 pounds of beef for potting, she orders 9 ounces of salts, and to 20 pounds of pork, for that will be the weight of a good ham, she orders 1 ounce of salts, 1 pound of sugar, and 1 pound of salt well mixed, and rubbed on the ham, then laid in a hollow tray for the pickle to swell about it, and to baste it every day, with its own liquor, for 1 month. Now, suppose that the whole national product of hams in 1 year could be cured by this teacher's orders, that is, with an equal quantity of sugar and salt. In the first place, the teacher's extravagancy would be obvious to any, though of never so weak a capacity, the price of sugar and salt compared. Secondly, what would still be of worse consequence would be the loss of all the hams, for the sugar would sweeten the salt so much as to entirely disable it from penetrating into the bones of them, therefore consequently must putrefy when put into trays, troughs, or tubs a month, and all the liquor to swell about them, the spirits of which cooperating with the juices of the hams would work like a gile fat, and in a month's time stink worse than any carrion. Yorkshire, says she, is famous for hams, and the reason is that their salt is much finer than ours in London, it being a large, clear salt, and gives the meat a fine flavour, and further informs you that she used to have it from Malden in Essex, and that the very same salt, that is, of Malden, will make any ham as fine as you can desire. How strangely ungrateful is Yorkshire, with its famous salt, in furnishing Malden in Essex therewith, and letting the greatest metropolis of the kingdom want so necessary a seasoning. So that this teacher could not get proper salt for her hams, except she got it from Malden, and by the strength of such salt, and her self-sufficiency, by setting forth its virtues so largely and clearly, which if it should exceed glass itself, the method she takes to use it would both destroy its virtue and beauty. The lady further recommends that tongues put into the above pickle, and to lie for a fortnight, they will be fine either immediately boiled or wood smoked. In her 10th page, she informs you how to keep hares or venison sweet, and make them fresh if they stink. In page 259, she says that she has seen potted birds so bad as that no person could bear the smell thereof, and that by managing of them she has made them as good as ever were eat. The former she made sweet, first by washing in warm water, secondly in lukewarm milk and water, then by drying and rubbing them all over with ginger, and hanging them in an airy place. The latter she made good by lying half a minute in boiling water, then applying pepper, salt, and mace to them. Scald their pot, and cover with fresh butter. I think the teacher shows the ignorant servant the way to make hams and tongues stink, but gives no directions how to make them fresh, except it be by skimming the ham 6 hours. But, and if a ham require that time, how many cooks and slaves would an elegant entertainment require? Now my own private judgment gives me to understand that 6 hours skimming a ham will in no case avail to sweeten a bad one, but may be of service to the broth, by taking off the gross fat, which might make the hogs sick. And I must own, if the hogs could show any gratitude to their benefactress, they are under a far greater obligation to the lady than gentry are for her portable soup, 8 or 9 hours boiled without skimming. Such monstrous, prodigious inconsistencies I am ashamed any cook should recommend, especially a lady. And had I not her instructions lying before me, I must acknowledge I should have been like St. Thomas for his unbelief. But finding her treatise hugely abounding with such inconsistencies and nauseous instructions, I shall not give my readers any further trouble with them in my book.